We find that during the 18th dynasty, whatever manifested there put an imprint on the genetic structure and the DNA of most of us here. Why do I say that? Roughly about 15 years ago, an entourage came out of Egypt and went through the United States and Canada. It was called King Tut's entourage. It dealt with Akhenaten, his father, and the golden funerary mask, and all of the regals that were found with that society at that time. And yet, think about this, and yet, millions of people in principal cities throughout the United States came out to view this procession, this entourage. It didn't even have any real sarcophagi. It had only face masks, if you would. Whether they had the real gold with it, who knows? But people by the millions lined up in the snow, in the rain, in the heat, to go to the museums in the various cities in the United States to view this entourage, to see just the face mask of King Tutankhamun. Ask you, why? These were not all black people that came out. These were not all white people that came out. These were not all yellow people that came out. Nor were the brown people that came out. People came out. And they didn't even know why. Something in their DNA or RNA structure, something locked in their so-called subconscious vibrated. And they said, this is some procession that must be kin to me, and I want to see it. I just want to be there. I'll tell you why many of the earth people wanted to be there. Because it was the last time on our earth, in even recent history, that the people who had the bloodline of the gods were able to reign upon earth. The people who had psychic power and the ability to work with the animal kingdom, to work with all the various species and kingdoms on earth and honored them. The people who were able to look forward to everlasting life because they knew that the soul could not die and that the soul was threatened again by a soulless wanderer who had come into our system and even called more and more upon their own venerated gods to help them by keeping them in touch with the universal prime creator, where they believed in Aton, or the one God, along with the plurality of gods. In the Old Testament and in the codexes of the Hebrews and the Masoretic text describes, were taken, again, many books which talked about the wars of the lords, which talked about the Ifrit, which talked about the humans and mankind in terminology that we have forgotten, and told us that there was an abomination that happened on this planet, and that there was an overview of people who wanted to see if this planet could ever outlive the laggard's entry into our solar system and upon this planet. And euphemized in the 18th dynasty, under Queen Tai, Queen Mu, again, Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and of course, Tutankhamun, the boy king, was the last time when these long heads, and this is why many of the Egyptologists and studiers of petroglyph and hieroglyphic writing and these so-called researchers state again that they were stylized drawings from a time when Egypt fell. They were not stylized drawings. That's the way these people's heads were. They had long heads, much like the ancient Assyrians had long heads, and the Syrians had long heads. They showed that there was a genetic structure here incorporated in a DNA RNA factor that was not normally in the genes of Earth people. And it gave them great power for psychic and telepathic prowess. King Akhenaten, sometimes called by the Greek Akhenamen per se, and Amenophis, or something like Amenhotep, was a general who, when he went out on his battles and so, got tired of the fighting. And when in Taxila, talked with the Phraotes there. Taxila is now Singapore. It was part of Asia. And was introduced to the Eightfold Path of Buddhism and introduced to Krishna and Buddha. Both of those terms mean the black or the black ones. Buddha means hail the black. Krishna is the purple black god of these people. They were told that there had been abominations here and that Egypt was going to be one of the chief centers for revitalizing this learning process once more and for seeing if the magical herbs, if the magical incantations, if the knowledge of the underworld and Amenta could now be once more brought back to a people possibly ready for the last time before the Wanderer's return, what they call the 13th planet, which Christians now call Wormwood, the return of the Dracons. And if there could be a time when the people here could reach enough understanding to stop this scourge from happening again and to continue on the path of righteousness, even with all the many humanoid forms that were now extant upon that earth. Well, seemingly, absolute power corrupts absolutely, as they taught me in philosophy. Because the more power you give to some fools, the more power they want. They're never satisfied with power because they are corrupt in their souls or are soulless. As a consequence, these priests that were there couldn't take the turn of events that Akhenaten brought forth. Akhenaten changed his name to He Who Worships the Most High Atan, or Ankh-Akhenaten. Ankh being now a scepter, meaning heralding or relegating, and Atan being the Most High. He stated he would change his name to Ankh-Akhenaten. And then, with all the many wives he had, and by the way, his many wives had given birth also to long-headed babies, which means that that was in his genes for his fulfillment. He had been either placed or planted here, or for some reason he had been changed so he would proliferate this new kind of being. And then he found Nefertiti, supposed to be now one of the most beautiful women that ever lived upon the earth, outside of Belikas and Makeda. And again, in finding Nefertiti, he chose her over all of his other wives. Two things she had: a very verdant zest for life and an extremely long head, which is looked upon as one of the marks of beauty, which many of the African people have tried to emulate since that time. Through her, he had supposedly sons. And I won't take it further than that when I say supposedly, because that is something for a black history lesson, and it begins to speak in terms that I think I should share with you, but I will say this, which I do think I should share with you. The long-headed babies, either of that union or other unions, and the fact that Nefertiti had a long head and was all very psychic, all of these people were, including Queen Tai, his mother, was the last, as I say, part of the DNA, RNA factor within a people on Earth that were set to rule. The right and passage of kings to rule was based again on the ability to control kingdoms. But we didn't understand that that kingdom was not just the kingdom of Earth, but the other species kingdom and interdenominational kingdoms. That's what meant for the rite of passage for man to come into his higher self. You didn't elect leaders, they were born. You didn't elect rulers, they were born to rule, and they showed it through phrenology, cranial concepts, and the DNA factor. If they couldn't be telepathic, if they couldn't control animals, if they couldn't understand the people, they were not fit to rule. And when they found a bloodline like that, they tried to keep that bloodline going. This is why, as we got into the Serbian and later on European rite of kings, where they tried to even use incest to keep a bloodline intact, it was brought on by the Nubian Egyptian dynasties, which showed them that there was something there to protect, and something there that met the right of rulership through spiritual qualities, not just political domination. Once Akhenaten had reached his height, he retreated from the warring world and from the so-called social world and did lots of meditations and began to call upon the gods, as it was said. So much so that Nefertiti began to fear for his life, because understanding the power-mad priest at that time, realized that if he was not a strong ruler and could not maintain an army, that they probably would usurp his power and probably just finally overthrow him. Well, she spoke better than she thought, because in her zeal and fear, she conspired with the priest of Amun, and he was poisoned, roughly around 39 years old at his death. However, they had the son, the boy king, Tutankhamun, and he died between 18 and 19, also poisoned. And one of the curses of that dynasty is that we don't even understand the real names of those people in that dynasty. If Amenaphis had changed his name to Ankh-Akhenaten because he venerated the one high supreme being in the cosmos, the creator of everything, and realized that there might have been lesser servants, which we now would call gods, who nothing but scientists on other worlds, and respected them, but did not respect him with the same, shall we say, humbleness that he did the Almighty. And he took the time to change his name to Ankh-Akhenaten. Why would he leave his name of his only son, or the son that he most respected, to be called Tutankhamun, after the priest of Amun? In the unity of early Egypt, Amun-Ra, Ra, the Most High Sun God, and Amun from the Nubian dynasty, and there was a great battle that was fought between I can't think of the guy's name now, Memphis or so on and so forth, and somebody else that represented Nubia. Why would he then have his son be called Tutak, what? Amun. He went against the priest of Amun. He changed his name from Amun. Why would his son be called Tutankhamun? His son would have been called what? Tutankhaten, Tutankhaten, because it venerated the Most High and the one God, the same as his father had changed his name, as many of the brothers and sisters are now understanding to change their names for the vibrations of the same, and it showed again that they were making a step forward in this immortal life. Why did I spend all that time with that? Because it is from the Egyptian technology, the Egyptian religion, and the Egyptian understanding that our whole system of government has now come forth. And what was said to be the first veneration of a higher what we would call more metaphysical culture is now sank to the point where it took 1 million men to have to come to the same venerated spot to remind them of the bloodline of the gods that still exist on earth.